Rain fell in a soft, steady sheet over the quiet road. The sky was a low gray lid, and the trees stood like dark brushes soaked in water. Elena's luxury car rolled to a slow, sick stop near a mile marker that looked tired from years of weather. The dashboard lights flickered. The engine coughed once and quit. For a long breath, she sat in the silence, hearing only the rain and the faint ticking sound from the engine. She tried the ignition again. Nothing. The cold found her, even with the car's heat fading, and she felt small in that big dark evening. She pressed her forehead to the steering wheel and exhaled. She lifted her face and looked around the car as if the answer might be hiding under a seat. In the back, on the floor, a small paper was peeking from under a blanket. She leaned and pulled it out. It was a child's drawing made with bright markers. A stick figure mother holding a stick figure girl's hand under a yellow sun with long rays. The letters Mom plus Myra were written in careful, uneven lines. The paper was crumpled at one corner from being carried around in a pocket. Elena smiled a sad, crooked smile, then folded the drawing and put it on the passenger seat, near her phone. She tried to think clearly. She had called a tow number from a sign she passed 10 minutes before the breakdown. She checked her phone and saw one bar of service. A message had come in from an unknown number, a link with a headline that made her heart sink, a gossip blog talking about her, the board, and a rumor that she was finished. She put her phone face down because the words felt heavy and cold. She breathed in, counting to 5, then breathed out. She knew panic would not help the car. It would not help anything. But the feeling still rose, like water in a glass, reaching the rim. 2 headlights grew in the distance and rolled toward her, slow and steady. A small tow truck pulled in front of her car and paused. Rain pattered on the truck's hood. A man stepped out wearing a dark jacket with a stitched name patch, Marco. He moved like someone who has done this many times, sure and careful in the wet. He smiled without showing teeth, a quiet smile that said, "It's okay, we will handle this." He tipped his cap slightly, then walked to her window and gestured politely. She cracked the window down just enough. The smell of rain and damp leaves came in with the cold. "Evening," he said in a gentle voice. "Trouble with the engine?" She nodded. "It died on me," she said. "No warning." He looked at the car's front, listened for a moment as if engines could talk. "We'll get you safe," he said, calm. "May I open the hood?" She unlocked the hood latch. He moved around, clicked it open, and leaned in with a small flashlight. She watched the beam move like a neat ribbon cutting through the wet air. He checked a cable, a belt, and a connection near the battery. He worked without drama. He did not sigh or shake his head. He did not speak fast or loud. He simply looked, then looked again. After a minute he closed the hood with a soft, respectful push and came back to her window. "It's likely electrical," he said. "Something small that can shut the whole thing down. I can tow you to my shop in town. We'll get it checked properly under lights." Elena nodded, relieved to have a plan. But the plan did not fix the storm inside her. She unclicked her seat belt and stepped out. Rain touched her hair and face. She did not care about her suit now. She stood there, looking at the dark road and the tow truck and the thin halos the headlights made on wet pavement. "I lost everything," she said, almost to herself. Marco paused. He did not rush to fill the silence with noise. He looked at her, then down at the back seat where he could see the corner of the drawing she had moved. The paper was bright even in the dim light. He stepped to the back door, which was half open from when she grabbed the drawing. "May I?" he asked, and when she nodded, he reached in and gently lifted the drawing as if it were something fragile. He held it in his hand for a second, then turned it so she could see it again. "You still have her," he said, and his voice was softer than the rain. Elena blinked, surprised. For a full second, she did not understand. "Who, she asked. He pointed to the drawing. Your daughter, he said simply. You still have her. The words fell into the space between them and did not splash. They sank. Elena looked at the paper, at the uneven letters, at the sun with long rays, and her eyes warmed. She had been holding her breath for hours, maybe days. She let out air she didn't know she was keeping. The sentence opened a small window in her chest, and a bit of light came through. Her name is Myra, she said quietly. She made that for my office. She has good taste in sunshine, he said with a kind smile. He tucked the drawing back onto the seat, careful to keep it safe and dry. Then he moved to the back of the car and began to set the tow hook. Each motion was clear and steady. He checked his chain. He hooked the line. The metal made small, clean sounds, like silverware on porcelain. The truck's winch hummed at a gentle pitch. The car eased up onto the truck bed without fuss. Elena watched and felt a strange mix of relief and humility. She ran companies. She made decisions that moved numbers on big screens. Yet here, in the rain, the most important thing was that someone knew what to do with a broken car and a broken moment. She stood under the small shelter of the tow truck's open door while he tightened the final strap. I was voted out, she said, not sure why she was telling this to a man she had just met. The board lost faith. Investors walked. Accounts are frozen. My name is going around in the worst way. The words came out gently, like a confession said to a friend. Marco nodded once. He did not ask for details. He did not try to solve the entire story. I'm sorry, he said. That is a lot. He clicked the last latch. Let's get you out of the rain. We'll talk on the way. Would you like a towel? I keep clean ones. Inside the truck's cab, it was warm and smelled faintly of coffee and clean cotton. He passed her a soft towel and turned the heater toward her side. The wipers brushed rain away in a calming rhythm. He checked his mirrors with care, then pulled onto the road. The broken car rode behind them on the bed, safe and quiet. Street lights passed like small moons in a row. Elena held the towel and watched the lights. Little by little, her shoulders lowered. Marco did not ask quick questions. He let the hum of the road fill the space for a few miles. At a red light, he glanced at the folded drawing on her lap and said, "How old is she?" 7, Elena said. She loves warm pancakes on Saturdays. I promised her that would be our thing. Lately I missed, more than I want to admit. He nodded. Promises are like little maps, he said. When we keep them, we know where we are. She let the words roll around in her head. They were simple words, but they had weight. The light turned green. The truck moved forward. She thought of Myra's bright eyes, the way she would lean into her side during bedtime reading, the way she would laugh at the silly way Elena made the spoon dance when feeding her as a toddler. The memory was warm enough to push back a bit of the cold. The shop is not far, Marco said. We'll get you some tea or coffee if you want. I'll run a quick check. If it needs a part we don't have at night, we can lock it safe and continue in the morning. She nodded and stared out at the wet world. Window glass, drops, light, everything seemed slow and gentle now. Thank you for stopping, she said. You could have been home, warm and dry. He shrugged. Some nights are long anyway, he said. I like helping a problem become smaller. She noticed his words again, not big speeches, just honest lines that fell true. She picked up her phone, thought about turning it over to look at the messages and news. Then she set it back down, face still to the seat. Something very small inside her said, not right now. She looked instead at the folded drawing again, and her thumb traced the sun's rays. She told him a bit more, gently, a deal that went wrong, an advisor who left, a room full of faces that turned quiet when she entered. She did not use sharp words. She only said the truth as if it were a list. He listened with the same attention he had given the engine. When she finished, he breathed in slowly, and then he said, "It is heavy, yes. But not everything can be taken." "What cannot be taken?" she asked softly. "Your word," he said. "Your care. Your daughter. Those are yours. Those are roots. From roots, things can grow again." The truck rolled through the small town's main street. A bakery sign glowed, "Closed for the night." A dog slept under an awning, peaceful in the rain's hush. They turned down a side road where a single street light made a bright circle on the wet ground. She saw the outline of a small, tidy garage with a simple sign. "That is us," he said. "We'll go in, dry off, and make a small plan for tonight." The word small plan felt right. She did not have energy for big plans. Not tonight. She had enough for one warm drink, one check of the car, one safe place to sit and breathe. The truck slowed, and he backed it into the garage with careful ease. He turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt kind. He stepped out to lower her car and guided it into a spot as if it were a guest. She sat for a moment, hands on the folded drawing. She whispered to herself, almost too soft to hear, "I still have her." The words came with a small light in her chest, a light that did not argue with reality but still said yes to tomorrow. He opened her door and offered a hand to help her down, not as a show, but as a gentle habit. She took it and stepped onto the clean, dry floor. The rain was now only a distant sound on the roof. He pointed to a chair and a small kettle on a shelf. "Tea?" he asked. "Tea," she said with a grateful nod. She looked around at the neat tools, the clear labels, the way each item had a home. She thought of her own days, which had become messy and loud. The kettle began to hum. She held the drawing again and pressed it flat on her lap. Inside the quiet, she felt the shape of a first step form, not to fix everything, but to begin. The garage smelled faintly of machine oil, coffee, and the soft sweetness of rain drifting in through the half-open door. Elena sat on a wooden chair near a small counter while Marco, the mechanic, moved around with calm precision. He wiped his hands, checked a monitor, and opened a drawer filled with neatly arranged tools. The space was simple but not shabby. Every tool had its place, every shelf was labeled, and even the radio on the corner hummed softly like an old friend keeping company. For someone used to glass offices and polished conference tables, the place felt strangely comforting. Marco poured hot water into a chipped mug and handed it to her. "It's chamomile. Helps when the day has been too heavy," he said. She accepted it with both hands, feeling the steam warm her face. She noticed he had given her the newer mug while keeping the older one for himself. Small details like that stood out in a night like this. As the kettle clicked off, she began to speak, hesitant at first, then more freely. "I thought I could control it," she said softly. "I thought if I worked harder, pushed faster, I could keep the company safe. But in the end, the board thought otherwise. They voted me out. Accounts are frozen. Investors turned cold overnight. People I called friends stopped answering calls." Her fingers wrapped tighter around the mug. "Now, even strangers read about me on their phones like I'm a headline instead of a person." Marco leaned against the workbench, not interrupting. He had the patience of someone who knew that listening was sometimes the only repair a heart needed. She pulled out the folded drawing again and placed it on the table. "This is Myra. She's 7. Every Saturday, we used to make pancakes together. That was our thing." Her voice cracked. "But then I started missing Saturdays. Meetings. Calls. Travel. One day she asked me, 'Do you still like pancakes, Mommy?' A tear slipped before she could stop it. Marco took a slow sip of his coffee before speaking. "When I lost my job at the factory, I thought I lost everything too. We had built a life around it. Paychecks, routines, the pride of steady work. Then it closed. I sat at my kitchen table thinking I had nothing left. But my little boy came up with a broken toy truck and said, "Fix it, Dad." That's how this place began. I started fixing what was in front of me, one small thing at a time. His words settled over her like a blanket. Not a speech, not advice thrown like stones, but lived truth, offered gently. He nodded at the drawing. She doesn't need boardrooms or headlines. She needs pancakes on Saturday. That's what stays in her heart. The rest, money, titles, headlines, they're clouds. Sometimes heavy, but they pass. Elena let the words sink in. It had been so long since someone spoke to her without expecting something in return. She looked at him, at the plain shirt with the stitched name, at the steady hands that had hooked her car with such care. "What should I do now?" she asked, almost like a child. Marco thought for a moment. "Start small. Tonight, rest. Tomorrow, make a list. Call 3 people you trust. Not 10, not 20. Just 3. Tell them the truth, not the version you tell investors. And promise Myra one small thing you will not miss again. Keep that promise. That's a root. From there, more can grow." His words were so simple that at first she wanted to argue she was used to strategy charts, timelines, crisis management. But when she pictured Myra's face over pancakes, she realized the truth of it. Simplicity sometimes carried more strength than the biggest plan. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then began typing names into her notes. Call Sarah, head of customer care. Call Mr. Alvarez, a supplier who had believed in them from the start. Call my sister, ask her to pick up Myra tomorrow. Looking at the list gave her a small sense of control, like holding the first rung of a ladder in the dark. Marco glanced at the list and nodded with quiet approval. That's it? Not everything at once. Just enough to begin. He returned to the car, running diagnostics with practiced hands. The hum of the machine filled the garage. He explained in plain words, "It needs a part. Not serious, but I don't have it until morning. You're safe here for the night. Lock the office door if you nap on the chair. I'll be nearby." Elena touched the folded drawing again. The colors looked brighter under the workshop's warm light. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't just for the tea or the car, it was for giving her a reason to breathe differently, to see beyond the storm. He waved a hand as if brushing away thanks. "First, we get you safe. Then we talk bills." He said it so matter-of-factly that she almost laughed for the first time in weeks. The radio shifted songs, something soft and old. She leaned back, letting the hum of tools and the gentle music hold her. For the first time in months, she felt the weight of her world loosen, if only by a fraction. She wasn't the CEO right now. She was a tired mother with a kind mechanic reminding her of the simplest truth: if you still have someone who loves you, you have not lost everything. That night, in a small garage smelling of rain and coffee, the first seed of hope was planted again. The small garage grew quiet as the night deepened. Rain slowed into a drizzle, tapping softly on the roof like fingertips on glass. Elena sat wrapped in a blanket Marco had given her, the folded drawing resting on her lap. She felt calmer than she had in weeks, but the weight of her downfall still pressed on her shoulders. The silence gave her too much room to remember boardroom betrayals, closed doors, and faces that turned away when she needed help most. She stood and stretched her legs, walking slowly around the garage. A row of photos hung on one wall, framed simply. Most were old black and white or faded color pictures of people standing outside a large factory building. One photo caught her eye: a younger Marco, dressed in work clothes, smiling with a group of men near a gate. Behind them, a sign showed the factory's name. The picture had the air of pride, of people who belonged somewhere, who believed in what they were making. When Marco returned from checking her car, he saw her looking at the photo. For the first time since she met him, his face grew serious. "That was the factory I worked at for years," he said quietly. "They closed it down. We all walked out one day with nothing." Elena swallowed hard. Her company had once been involved in decisions about suppliers, cost cuts, and moving production overseas. She looked again at the factory sign, realizing it was one of the plants her team had indirectly affected years back. Shame ran through her like a cold wind. That was because of my company, wasn't it?" she whispered. Marco didn't scowl. He didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded. "Yes. I lost my job there. Many of us did. It was hard. I was angry for a long time. But I learned something: anger doesn't feed your family. It doesn't repair broken things. I had to choose whether I'd drown in it or build something new." He gestured to the garage. "This is what I built." Elena looked down at her shoes, her heart heavy. "I didn't see it then. I only saw numbers on reports. I never saw the people behind the numbers. I'm so sorry." Marco picked up a small wooden plaque from the workbench and handed it to her. Carved into the wood were the words, "Hands fix metal. Words fix hearts." He spoke softly, "We all make choices that hurt someone, even without meaning to. What matters is what we do after we see the truth." His words struck her deeply. She had been chasing reputation, profit, and growth without remembering the faces in the factory, the staff who worked late, or the customers who saved their money to buy what her company sold. She had been a leader, but had she been human enough? Marco leaned back on the bench. "You still have a chance to show people who you are, not just who the papers say you are. If I may suggest, speak to them. Not with speeches written by lawyers or PR teams. Speak with your own voice. Honest. Plain. Let them see the person who loves a daughter named Myra and wants to keep her promises." Elena thought about his advice. "You think they'd listen?" she asked. "They will listen to honesty," Marco replied. "Even if they don't agree, they'll respect it. Trust is not a wall you build once. It's a bridge. And right now, you need to place the first plank." His calm certainty gave her courage. She opened her phone and hesitated, then opened the camera. Sitting on a chair in that humble garage, hair still damp from the rain, wrapped in a blanket, she pressed record. Her voice shook at first, but then steadied. "To my team," she began. "I know you've seen the headlines. I know many of you are worried, maybe even scared. I won't pretend I have all the answers. I don't. But I promise you this, I won't lie to you. If payroll is late, I'll tell you. If a deal falls through, I'll tell you. I am still here. I believe in you, and I will fight to rebuild trust, even if it takes time. If you stand with me, I will stand with you." When she stopped recording, her hands trembled. She looked at Marco, unsure. He gave a small nod. "That's a plank," he said with a half smile. She uploaded the video to a private group chat for her employees and waited, her stomach tight. For minutes, nothing came. Then one reply, "Thank you for telling us. We needed to hear from you." Another, "I'm still with you." Then a flood short notes of relief, encouragement, even new ideas for saving money and keeping customers. Tears blurred her eyes, but this time they were warm. Marco pointed at the phone. "See? A bridge starts with one plank. Now, you build it, step by step." Elena leaned back, breathing more freely than she had in months. She realized the garage wasn't just a place where her car was being repaired, it was where her spirit was being repaired too. And all it took was honesty, a child's drawing, and a mechanic who believed that small steps could lead to strength again. That night, for the first time in a long time, Elena believed she could stand back up. Morning light came soft through Elena's apartment blinds. For the first time in weeks, she woke without her chest tightening in panic. She remembered the garage, the blanket, the tea, and Marco's words, "If you have roots, you can grow again." Those words played in her head as she reached over to switch off her alarm. She looked at her phone. Dozens of messages from her team filled the screen. Not cold replies, not angry ones, real voices. Some said they'd stay, some shared cost-cutting ideas, one even offered to skip a paycheck for a month. It was not everything she needed, but it was enough to tell her she wasn't alone anymore. She pressed her palm to her chest and whispered, "Thank you." By mid-morning, she drove back to Marco's garage to pick up her repaired car. The rain had cleared, and the air smelled fresh, like something had been washed clean. Marco was already outside, wiping his hands. The car looked ready, polished even. He handed her the keys along with a small handwritten note folded neatly. "It's just a reminder," he said. She opened it. In plain block letters, it read, "Saturday pancakes don't skip." She smiled, holding back tears. "Send me the bill," she said firmly. "I owe you more than I can say." Marco shook his head. "The bill is fair. No more, no less. The rest you'll repay in how you live." He said it with the steady tone of someone who didn't speak in riddles but in truths he believed. Back in the city, Elena walked into her company's building with a new calmness. She had already made a decision: she no longer wanted the corner office with the skyline view. She moved into a smaller space near the customer service floor. She told her assistant to cancel all the expensive flower deliveries and gourmet lunches. She sold off a few extra pieces of office furniture and redirected the money to cover overdue staff payments. For herself, she cut her salary to almost nothing. Her team watched quietly at first, unsure if these changes were temporary. But when she picked up the phone and personally called vendors, no assistance, no scripted lines, they started to believe something was different. "This is Elena," she said simply to each vendor. "I can't pay you on time this month, but I will pay you. Here is what I can do, half now, half in 6 weeks. If you agree, I give you my word you'll see it." Some declined politely, but others, moved by her honesty, said yes. Saturday came. Elena woke early, went to the market, and bought flour, milk, eggs, and syrup. When Myra came into the kitchen rubbing her eyes, Elena was already whisking batter. "Pancakes?" Myra asked, surprised. "Pancakes," Elena said with a grin. They cooked together, laughing when the first one came out lopsided. Syrup dripped onto the table, Myra got flour on her cheek, and for once, Elena left her phone face down, not checking it even when it buzzed. Later that week, something unexpected happened. One of Elena's employees shared her late-night garage video on social media, adding the caption, "Our boss spoke from the heart." This is real leadership. Instead of gossip or hate, the video began to spread with positive comments. Headlines shifted from "CEO loses everything" to "CEO takes pay cut to save staff." People appreciated the honesty. Marco, meanwhile, hadn't just fixed her car. He quietly rallied small businesses in town. They agreed to pre-order a basic version of her company's products, simpler and cheaper to make, but reliable. It was enough to create a lifeline of orders. When Elena heard about it, she was stunned. "Why would you do that?" she asked Marco over the phone. "Because," he said, "people help people. That's how communities survive. You forgot for a while, but you remembered again. Now keep remembering." Back in the office, Elena built what she called her people board. It wasn't made of wealthy investors or polished executives. It included one longtime customer, one supplier, one employee, and one voice from the community: Marco. They met monthly, not for profit charts, but to answer one question: Are we keeping trust alive? Bit by bit, the company found its footing again. They no longer tried to look like the biggest name in the industry. Instead, they focused on being close, reliable, and human. Customers began to return, not because of flashy ads, but because they felt seen and respected. One evening, Elena sat in her small office, a stack of drawings from Myra pinned to the wall behind her. She thought about how far she'd fallen and how far she'd come back by choosing honesty, humility, and the promise of pancakes. For the first time in her career, she felt not just like a leader, but like a whole person. 1 year later, the air around Elena's life felt different. The same city streets, the same tall buildings, but she walked them with a lighter step. The woman who once whispered, "I lost everything," now understood that everything had never meant the boardroom or the balance sheets. Everything was pancakes on Saturday mornings. Everything was trust earned back one honest word at a time. Her company was smaller than before, but steady. Instead of chasing every flashy opportunity, she focused on what mattered: delivering quality to real people who counted on her. The offices were no longer polished with glass and cold marble. They were simpler, warmer, filled with laughter from employees who once feared losing their jobs but now felt part of something meaningful. On her office wall hung not certificates or awards but drawings by Myra. One showed the two of them eating pancakes under a bright sun. Another had their small apartment with a heart above it. These pictures reminded Elena daily that success was not measured by the tallest building but by the smallest promises kept. Every Saturday, the pancakes became ritual. Sometimes they were perfect golden circles, sometimes uneven with burned edges, but always filled with joy. Elena and Myra would eat with messy hands and sticky cheeks, and Elena made sure her phone stayed face down on the counter. That simple choice rebuilt something between them that money could never buy. Her honesty also changed the way her team saw her. They no longer feared her as the distant CEO. They trusted her as a leader who spoke truth even when the truth was hard. When payments were delayed, she told them first. When sales rose, she shared the joy. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being real. And in that realness, they found loyalty. One morning, Elena drove back to Marco's garage for a routine checkup. She wanted to thank him properly. In her hands, she carried a plaque engraved with the words, "Because you reminded me what cannot be taken." She gave it to him with a smile that was half gratitude, half awe. But she had more. In front of his garage, with her staff watching through a video call, she announced a new initiative, a fund in memory of Marco's late wife, offering retraining grants to workers who lost jobs when factories closed. The moment was quiet but powerful. Marco's eyes grew damp, though he only nodded and looked away for a second before saying, "She would have liked that." Her staff, hearing the story of the garage for the first time, clapped through the screen. They now knew where the turning point had come the night a broken-down car brought their CEO to a mechanic who spoke truth with gentle strength. Elena's closing words in that small ceremony summed up everything. "I said once that I lost everything. But Marco reminded me that I still had my daughter, my word, and my people. That was enough to start again. That will always be enough." Later that day, Elena buckled Myra into the back seat of the car. The engine hummed smoothly, the same one Marco had repaired that rainy night. As they drove away, she looked in the mirror and saw Myra holding a new drawing: two figures, mother and daughter, standing hand in hand under a sun that shone brighter than ever. Marco lifted a hand from the doorway as they passed, and Elena returned the wave with a smile that carried no sadness, only strength. Above the garage door, the wooden sign caught the light: "Hands fix metal. Words fix hearts." Elena knew then that her life's real work wasn't rebuilding the company, though that mattered. Her real work was keeping her roots strong: her daughter, her honesty, her promises. Everything else would grow from there. She no longer whispered, "I lost everything." Now, in her heart, she carried a new truth: "I have enough to begin again."